I'm Scott L. Miller. This is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. Today I'm going to be addressing a comment that was made on my show just today that mentioned when we were talking about investing in businesses here in Nicaragua. And he didn't reference Nicaragua, but I worry that people may have this impression, so I want to talk about it. He said there are some countries that allow you to invest yet don't allow you to work in your own business. And this is something that is misleading because it is simply all countries, for all intents and purposes, have this limitation. It is something that only comes up in some countries where it's so easy to invest that sometimes you forget that you're looking at a different pattern based on how much they've allowed you to do rather than how much they're not allowing you to do. There are essentially no exceptions to the fact that you must have a work visa in order to work anywhere in a country. It is very rare to have some exception to that. I got some dogs running around in the background there. So I want to talk about how this applies to Nicaragua and how you need to think about this, and we're going to talk about that right after the bump. So the reason that this comes up, I assume, is that here in Nicaragua, it's common to talk to people who are potentially skirting the law and working in their own businesses. They will have a business here and find out that they're not allowed to work in it necessarily. Of course, there's always some amount of gray area. You need to be able to stop by and check out your business. You need to be able to inspect it and manage it to some degree. But can you actually work in it? That's a difficult question. In most cases, the answer to this is no, you cannot work in the business. However, it is common that it'll be overlooked, so you will run into many people who will tell you, well, of course I've worked in my own business. I've owned a business for a long time. I work in it all the time. No one ever says a word, and often you can get away with it. But is that legal? In most cases, the answer is no, but it's a gray area that's often overlooked. The light's a little bit better. Sorry about that. And the reason is that if you are working in your own business, you are using your investment potentially to create a job for yourself, a job you may not be approved to have. The idea of investing in a country is for the purpose of creating labor. That's why you're allowed to invest in most countries. So if you're investing in the country but then working for it for yourself, are you providing the goal of allowing you to invest in it? No, generally you are not. Not 100% of the time. It's possible that you still would be doing something positive, but the way that they generally measure it, and especially here in Nicaragua, is by how many jobs you're creating. If you're working that job, you are removing a job from the economy rather than adding one or paying for one. And so that's not something that they want to see happen. This may feel counterintuitive to a lot of people who are thinking about investing, but I assure you it is anything but counterintuitive. It should be absolutely obvious, but there are some simple reasons that we end up getting tricked with this. So let's step back and look at the average worldwide, what we expect to find if we don't do any research. Anyone may be an exception, but by and large, you assume that this is how things are going to work. Most countries in the world allow you to work there only if you have a work visa. There are extremely few countries, with literally no exception that I know of, but I'm assuming there is one, where you're allowed to show up in a country as a tourist and simply start working and pulling a paycheck, or working and somehow obtaining a living from being in that country. The U.S. certainly doesn't allow this. No one in Europe allows this. Canada doesn't allow this. I don't know anyone in Latin America allows this. Never heard of even a rumor of a country that allows this, but in theory, one must exist, but it's certainly extremely rare. So we assume if you're going to work that you have to have a work visa. Some places these are easy, some they're nearly impossible, but they're out there. Now, if you are going to invest in a country, most countries make investing in them relatively easy. If you want to invest in the United States, you just want to put money into a business there, it is crazy easy, and Nicaragua is no exception. If you want to invest here, it is outrageously simple, even if you've never set foot in the country. But neither Nicaragua nor the United States nor any country that I've ever heard of will simply allow you to invest and then be allowed to work, whether it's in your own business or another. Giving $5 as an investment is not a bypass to the visa system. If it was, you would simply give $1 to any business in the country, say I've invested, and now be allowed to work in that country. That doesn't make sense at all. And obviously no one does that. But because investing in some countries is so easy, and in some countries like Nicaragua, it's so likely that you're going to want to invest in a business that you can put your hands on and walk into and be the owner of, it feels different than when you're just giving a few dollars to a stock investment in the United States. But the actual legal difference in investing is nothing. They're exactly the same mechanism. You're simply putting a few dollars into the investment pool of businesses in the country. In one case, it might be a fund. In one case, it might be direct. It doesn't matter, and it could be either way. So the idea that simply investing is going to get you any right to live, enter, stay, work, anything like that doesn't exist in any real country. So that's important. The thing that throws people off is not that you are not allowed to do these things. It's actually confusing how easily you're able to do other things. You're able to, in Nicaragua, own your own business in its entirety without having to have a Nicaraguan partner, for example. And the same thing in the U.S. You don't need an American to be part of your business in the United States either. I have something crawling in my hat. And so this is something we're basically used to, but many countries that we look at have a lot of hoops you have to go through to actually be able to move past investing to actually have real ownership of a business. So if we're looking at, for example, many countries in Southeast Asia, if you want to invest in their country, you can just put money into a mutual fund or whatever. You never have to go to the country. You don't even have to know where that country is. You can invest in that country. Certainly, it's not going to even help you with your tourist visa, right? Nothing of the sort. But in Nicaragua, while you can do that, you also can very easily, just as easily, buy an entire business. You can go online, look on Facebook Marketplace, see someone with a business, offer them some money, and buy the business outright. You never have to come here. You don't have to know what continent Nicaragua is on. Many people do not know what continent Nicaragua is on. Many people who invest here, some who even visit here, may not know on what continent it is, much like the girls who went to Tunisia recently, not knowing what continent they were going to. So this idea that it's going to get you something by owning, it doesn't make any sense. But the ease at which you own an entire business suddenly feels like, but don't I have to work in my own business if I own it? Well, that's a you problem, right? You bought a business without a plan on how to work in it. That's probably a mistake. You should think these things through. What was your plan to be running something without having legal employees? That's not something you can normally do, and certainly you can't do in any country we know of. Definitely none in the Western Hemisphere. That's where it becomes confusing. It's very hard, in theory, to simply buy an entire in-person business that deals with customers in the United States remotely. Could you legally? Of course you can, but people don't do it. No one calls up Wyoming, sets up an LLC, and uses that to remotely form a restaurant or hotel or boutique or something like that, a surf shack or anything like that in the United States. I'm sure someone somewhere has, but it's not something you do. It sounds absurd. But that same action when you're looking at Nicaragua is something people do with regularity. People are like, you know what? I just want to have a little restaurant. What's that going to cost me? You might be able to set up a restaurant for $5,000. Well, okay, I'm just going to go buy a restaurant. Why would I bring in partners for $5,000 investment? If I own it myself, I can go eat there anytime I want. It's all mine, make bad decisions, whatever. I'm going to do what's fun. I don't like the town it's in. It doesn't matter if it's making more money. It's going to move to the town I want to be in. Make less money. I don't care. I just want to have a hot dog stand. Great. It's a fun thing for you, right? But that fun little hobby, that few dollars, $5,000, $5, whatever it is not going to magically get you the right to be an employee in the country. It is not a free pass to bypass those systems. What becomes confusing is that if you want to be able to be a recognized investor, not just an investor. Anyone can be an investor. Anybody can give 1 penny into a big pool. Let's get everyone in my community together. Let's all give 1 penny. We'll all go out and buy a little tiny hot dog stand with all those pennies. We got 14,500 people here in the community. That would be $14.50 that we could raise. We're not going to get very far, but we could do something with all those pennies. And technically, all of you would be investors. That is not a way to bypass your visa, clearly, but technically, you could claim to be investors. You can buy a little square inch of Scotland for $1 as well and call yourself a laird. Okay. So we're not going to bypass that. To become a recognized investor, someone with a visa for investors, or investor residency as it is called, you have to meet major milestones. One of those is having an investment in excess of $30,000 per person. That's not trivial. So they put a monetary number on it, but it has to be more than that. You have to set up and have a functional business with that. You have to have a number of employees with that. Once you've done enough things and you qualify through all the other visa application mechanisms, you will actually receive the right, assuming you do pass all those things, to work in the country. If you're a true investor in the way we mean when we say I'm an investor, right, meaning you have investor residency, then you can work here in Nicaragua and in most countries that I know of. I'm not saying that all will give you that right, but I don't know of any who don't give you the right to work in the country if you are recognized by the government as an official investor. And the reason for this, we've talked about in other videos, is that they don't want people to not be able to have a business that is functioning in their country and creating jobs and improving the economy and failed to maintain it because they weren't allowed to step in and help out from time to time or oversee things, or in doing things they were allowed were constantly being called out or threatened with being reported, even though it was a gray area or they were clearly doing the right thing. It may seem like maybe they're not. And it's difficult to draw those exact lines. Just because you're pulling or not pulling a salary does not define whether or not you are working. It would be a handy guide. It would lean one way or another, but it is not itself an indicator. It's very easy to find other ways to remunerate yourself when you are working in, especially in a business that you have invested in. So looking for salary alone isn't a guaranteed indicator. So they don't want people to stop investing just because they're fearful that they won't be allowed to do the things necessary to run their business. So anyone who's a real investor here in Nicaragua or basically anywhere is going to be allowed to stay there. The U.S. being an obvious exception to this, where no amount of business in the United States is going to even give you a serious move towards being able to stay and work. You may not even be able to visit the country. In Nicaragua, you're much more likely to be able to at least come here and very likely to be able to work when necessary. A key difference here is that if you do have a business here, if you are able to put in $30,000, you are able to have employees, you are able to do all these things, there's no real chance that you're going to go use that right to go work somewhere else. It doesn't make any sense, not in the real world. On the rare occasion that it would, nobody cares. It's so unlikely, but I've never heard of any situation where it would actually happen. For those who are using it, it only makes sense to use in your own business. Until you've come here, until you've analyzed the economy, people are convinced that that is not the case, but it takes the slightest research and common sense to go, oh, there's no chance I'm going to qualify for this and be trying to earn minimum wage working in Spanish in Nicaragua for someone else. I own my own company. I'll just work there. Well, that's you're allowed to do if you're going to that point of becoming an investor and showing that you are creating more jobs than you're taking out of the system. So it works. So yes, if you're looking very quickly and you're asking the wrong questions and skipping over key components, it's easy to look at many countries, and Nicaragua included. And again, the person who made this comment did not make it about Nicaragua, but I want to make sure people aren't thinking this way. It's easy to get a feeling like, oh, you can start a business and you're not allowed to work in it. That's correct. Universal, worldwide, that is how things work. Just starting a business is not enough to get you the right to work. Otherwise, you would have a free pass for 1 penny to get around anything. And you can say, well, that's absurd. 1 penny isn't enough. There's a number where it should make sense. You're right, there is. And that's $30,000 in Nicaragua, which is the lowest of any country I know of. It's certainly not the lowest, but I don't know of anyone lower. It's way lower than most countries by far, definitely the lowest in the region. And if you're willing to do that and meet a few other logical requirements that would be relatively obvious if you were truly trying to operate a real business, then absolutely you're allowed to work here. So if that response is, yeah, putting in a penny or a dollar clearly isn't what we meant by investing in the country, we're all on the same page. The problem is that people putting in 5,000 or 10,000 have a tendency to potentially feel like they are a full investor, like the people putting in 30,000 and doing the paperwork, and then get confused because they're not seen as an investor by the country, even though they can say it in English legitimately. And the same thing happens here, that we see a lot of people get confused by the things that they're not allowed to do because they're trying to be here as a tourist. And we do promote quite often that being here as a tourist is the best thing to do for most people. It is most of the time. But then people who are tourists, and even people who are expats with residency, are often like, I want to do all these like crazy things, like importing vehicles and all kinds of stuff you would never do even as a citizen of most countries. You suddenly want to do as a tourist here, and they're like, why wouldn't I be allowed to do that? This seems crazy. And when you step back and say, because you're just a tourist, would you go on vacation for the weekend to Sweden and be like, I want to import, all this stuff, and I want to make deals with border controls and customs and do all this stuff while I'm on vacation? No, of course you wouldn't. That would be crazy. But people, because they're given so much leniency in how you can stay in Nicaragua, will sometimes do things that we would never, ever consider in other circumstances. and be like, well, why can't I just do that here? And even as a resident like me, with all the paperwork and all the rights to do things, I'm totally allowed to import vehicles and do all kinds of stuff. But it's still a crazy thing to want to do 99% of the time. It's not normal to say, ooh, all the car companies that are here, that are bringing in cars that mechanics are here for, I don't want to get that low-cost vehicle. I want to do a custom import and go through this huge amount of headache and deal with customs holding my car for a while and all the inspections manually and do all this all so I can own a different car. If you're a car collector, I get it. But if you're just thinking about getting a different car to drive, well, I don't like this car that's available in blue. I want to get it in green from some other country. Think about how bonkers that would sound if you did that in the US. Oh, I went to the Chevy dealer. They didn't have the model I like. So I ordered it from France and I'm having brought on a boat. That's not going to be a big deal, right? They're just going to let me import this vehicle. No, it's going to be a bunch of paperwork and it's going to take a bunch of money. They're going to tax you like crazy. There's going to be tariffs and all kinds of things, right? So you got to think in terms of what's really happening and then frame that in your worldview. And then it's like, oh, this stuff really is very straightforward, very easy, and incredibly permissive. You're not going to find another country that's more permissive. The difference is it's so permissive that we start to forget that the things that we're trying to do are out of question in any other country. And I learned this from technology is often people would say Linux is hard, Windows is easy, but people who work in tech think that's crazy. Obviously, Linux is the easiest thing to use. That's why everything that's easy is using Linux. Windows is the hardest thing you can use. Mac falls in the middle. And why would they think this? And the reason is actually because Windows is so hard that most of the tasks that people want to do on Linux, they can't do on Windows. And because they're not even given the chance to try it, they just write it off as easy to use because they can't do what they want. But on Linux, they can often do the thing that they want to do. It is a hard task because they're trying to do something very, very hard, like importing a vehicle as a tourist. And so they're like, oh, every time I use Linux, it's hard, right? Because you're only using it for hard tasks because you're only using Windows for easy tasks. It doesn't do hard tasks. But the ability to do something guarantees, by definition, that that thing is easier than where it's impossible, right? There's nothing harder than infinitely hard. And that's what Windows is. And that's what you're seeing in Nicaragua is it makes so many things so easy, so much is so permissive that suddenly when you have to do something that is partially as hard as some other country, it feels like it's being forbidden. And that is the farthest thing from reality. It's actually that you've just gotten used to having to do nothing or practically nothing to be able to do so much. You're able to move here without doing paperwork. You're able to start a business without doing paperwork. Well, you still have to do paperwork, but you don't have to have a visa to start a business. You don't have to have official permission to invest to do a business. You don't have to have a minimum amount to invest to have a business. You can do all these things and you can start a hot dog stand. You can start a tour business or whatever. And as long as you're not working in it, you can just do that, as you can most places. But it just feels different because it's so easy. And so we forget that the minimum requirements anywhere else while are still greater than the minimum requirements here for the hardest things, like being allowed to work in the country. I hope that that makes it more clear and that really when looking at Nicaragua, unless there's something I'm missing, some different scenario in all of these, whether it's being a tourist, being a resident, running a business, being able to work in your own business. In all of these, I don't know of any country, and especially not the US and Canada, who make it easier than Nicaragua. None of them have as such low limits. None of them have such low barriers. None of them allow you to do so much. This is the easiest, most permissive country in the region. It's the most easy and permissive one that I know. And so when we look at it, that should be our reaction. There's nowhere in the world where we can just do anything we want without having any cares whatsoever. But the closest you're going to get to that is here. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAllenMiller. It comes directly to me. It's like Patreon, helps pay for everything that it takes to do this show, the cameras and the software and licensing and all those things. Get in those comments, ask your questions, say hello, get in the show notes, and you can see how to contact me, how to join our WhatsApp group. Importantly, you can make a video of yourself and send it in. I love it when people do that. Other than that, remember, on Thursdays, we do a live stream. It's a great time to hang out with people from the community and to ask me questions live or just banter. We just hang out, have a beer, look at maps, look at restaurants around the country, talk about questions that people have, figure things out, get your guys' opinion, all kinds of stuff. It's a great time. Even if you're not looking at Nicaragua, you just want to be an expat, you want to be an investor, all those things. It's a great time to get real-time feedback and be able to, for me to ask you more questions and dig into things that we want to do. It's really a good time to hang out. So that's our Thursday nights. Remember, put it on your calendar and join us. We're getting more and more people every week. It's cool, right? I will see all of you tomorrow.